Hey everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and in this video, I'm going to share some information with you on a lovely little plant called Lobelia. Now, Lobelia is in the Bellflower family, and the species that I'm going to talk about is Lobelia inflata. Now, this is a book that was in my dad's original book, From the Shepherd's Purse, so of course, it made it in my book, Be Your Own Shaman, and I've got this open to the page of Lobelia. So you can see those pretty purple flowers. Now, Lobelia is something that many people grow in their flower garden because it adds such a beautiful pop of color. And for the most part, they use a species called Great Blue Lobelia. And it just has these big flowers. Sometimes Lobelia can seem a little bit blue, but for the most part, the Lobelia that's full of the medicinal properties will either be purple, yellow, or white. And Lobelia grows in Canada, mostly in the East, in the United States, and it has definitely moved to the West because I see Lobelia all over the hiking trails here in Utah. And I've seen it in places in California. You can actually get the seeds and plant Lobelia in your flower garden or your medicinal herb garden. Now, there's also a bit of interesting history, and I don't know if it's necessarily controversy, but Lobelia is a very potent, powerful plant. Now, the part of the plant that you use are the flowers, the seeds, and the leaves. And the leaves are something that's probably the most common because you can put it into several different forms like teas, tinctures, powders, capsules. You can make a poultice out of it. There's a lot of things that you can do with Lobelia that has some really powerful, well-known medicinal properties. Now, it also has a long, rich history, Native American use. In fact, it has a nickname of Indian tobacco, and it was used as a replacement for people who were looking for some of the same similar effects of nicotine, but without the addiction. Because it does have, I think it's called Lobeline or Lobeline, compound in Lobelia that has some similar to nicotine properties without being addictive. And it's been used to help people break the addiction of regular tobacco or nicotine. So it actually got the nickname of Indian tobacco. Now, it also is known as pukeweed, and for a reason, because at really high doses, it can make you vomit. In fact, there's a very well-known 19th century herbalist. His name is Samuel Thompson. And if you study herbs, you study herbalism, and you go back to some of the really interesting, quirky tips on some of these plants, then you have definitely heard of Samuel Thompson. And what he was really well known for was discovering the idea and popularizing the idea of needing to purge and cleanse and sweat. It was something he really believed helped humans be well. And I will say sometimes, think about it when you're really sick, maybe you eat something bad or you have a really bad flu, and when you throw up, you feel better. And I've experienced this myself. I've maybe eaten something bad or I've got a stomach bug, something that just makes me unsettled. And while it's horrible to throw up, no one ever likes to throw up. You always feel better when you throw up. So apparently what happened I don't know if he was a doctor, but I know he was a well-known herbalist, is Samuel Thompson. He discovered Lobelia, I think through a tribe of Native Americans, and they gave it to him in a high dose and produced a vomiting effect. And then he incorporated it into his practice as an herbalist. And he actually got a pretty bad reputation for this. And it was nicknamed vomit weed because of his work with this. Now, what's really interesting is that there's a really amazing book that's been around for, 50, 75 years. It's called Back to Eden. And if you've ever read that book or been interested in reading it, there's a section in there with about 20 pages defending Samuel Thompson and his work with Lobelia. And it's a pretty incredible part of the book where they're basically saying some of these plants, they need to be brought forward because of the healing that they do for humanity. And if you think about modern humans, we don't like to get worse before we get better. We don't realize that a symptom is giving us a message. Instead, what we typically will do, we'll cover up the symptom with something that will suppress it or stop it, when in reality, this has given us a powerful, powerful message. This is probably a great place for me to tell you that the information I share with you is not meant to be medical advice. This is just my own opinion. It's meant to educate and entertain you only. And especially when it comes to plants like Lobelia, you want to do your own due diligence, use your own intuition, your own research, your own education. If you have any questions about using herbs and plant medicine, definitely check in with your healthcare practitioner, check in with a master herbalist, check in with a naturopath, someone who can give you guidance, especially if you're new to herbal medicine. And this is where the potency of something like Lobelia comes in, because it can have powerful effects in the way that it improves your health, but you need to have a lot of information and you just need to be smart. And I know that we've been so disconnected from Mother Nature that we haven't really passed on these deep wisdom tips on things like Lobelia. Now, there are some known cautions with Lobelia. It is toxic in high doses, and this is where you will vomit or puke. You can throw up. It can cause some nausea, some sweating. Your heart rate might, speed up a little bit. And this is at high doses. And I've personally been using Lobelia for a long time in different blends, with other different herbs. And I've used it as a single for lung issues because it's really well known as an expectorant. So it can help clear mucus out of the lungs. And this is actually one of the things that if you were to take it at a high dose, which I don't suggest or recommend, that it might cause you to throw up, but at the same time clear a lot of mucus out of your lungs as well. So it is known for that. It is very potent. It's definitely not for use during pregnancy or breastfeeding. And it may, along with a lot of other herbs, it may interact with certain medications. And this is, again, if you're on medications that you have any kind of questions about, definitely check in with your doctor and just make sure that what you're doing and what you're adding and what your goals are fitting with what you're currently doing and what you're on. Now, the final thing, a kind of a cool historical quirky fact, is it has a really beautiful mystical representation. And a lot of herbalists in the 18th century and going forward believes that it unlocks emotional blockages that we get as human beings. So this is one of those things that you look back at the history and you start doing some of your own research. And I think you would be really, really pleasantly surprised at what some of these plants do and what they've been known for. So a quick list of health benefits. It's very well known for its ability to provide respiratory support. So for things like asthma, it clears mucus out of your lungs. It's also what's known as an antispasmodic. So it can reduce spasms in the lungs, making breathing easier. Muscle relaxation, so it eases tension and spasms in the body. So it's really well known as a nervine, which can help with nerves and nervous conditions. Nicotine withdrawal, help people quit smoking. It's got similar properties to nicotine, but it reduces the cravings without the harmful side effects, which is beautiful. It does have some antimicrobial properties, and it's a nervine, so it provides nervous system support. So what I would suggest that you do is do some of your own due diligence. And this would be a really fun plant to add into your herb garden. It's a plant that likes, in a way, disturbed soils. But what I mean by that, one of the things that my dad taught me is when you have a forest that maybe you're clearing out a section of trees and there's all of a sudden sunlight on a place that maybe was in shade for, say, 50 years. You clear out, you maybe do a clearing in a part of a forest. All of a sudden, plants like Lobelia will spring up because the seeds can lie dormant underneath the soil because they need sunlight. They need sunlight to germinate and grow. But if you clear out a bunch of trees, say you're making a path through a wooded forest for a hiking trail, and you clear it out, the next spring, the next year, there will be lobelia most likely growing along this path, even if the seeds have been lying there dormant for 50 years. So lobelia is something that is annual or biennial, which means it's not going to come back every single year if the conditions aren't just right. But of course, where you're going to get the lobelia plant is in the seeds. So you're going to use the seeds, the flowers, and the leaves. And if you were to harvest a lobelia plant, you simply cut it off at the stem and dry. You can dry the whole thing on the stem. So you're going to get the seeds, the flowers, and the leaves. So lobelia, like I said, is something that is one of my favorites. And the nice thing is you don't need much. You only need a tiny bit of lobelia. And this is something that I've personally experienced. I have lobelia tincture in my home apothecary, and that's my favorite way to keep lobelia on hand for myself. Now, I've also used lobelia in a poultice form, where I've made a poultice, I've crushed them up, the fresh leaves, and I've taken a couple flowers, but most of the leaves are what I've used. And if you have a bruise or an insect bite, an insect sting or whatever, lobelia is one of those plants that if you have it available, you can make a poultice that can help the sting, the pain of a bee sting or a wound, like a bruise. It can really help with a bruise. So I love having these single tinctures at my beck and call for whenever I need them. And the way that I like to do this, if I ever get a cold or a flu or something that kind of settles in my lungs, of course I've got my things like my Lobelia, my Osha, things like that. But because I know about lobelia, I know how to use it, and I'm very familiar with it since I was a child, basically, I will add like 10 or 15 drops of just lobelia tincture into a cup of tea or in with some other tinctures and water, and I'll just drink it down. And its power is in its small quantities, from my experience and my opinion. So I'd love to know what you think about lobelia. Do you use it in your herbal apothecary? Have you made yourself any homemade remedies out of lobelia? Are you afraid of lobelia? That's a good question, right? This is a powerful plant. It does have a lot of cautions. If you were to look this up online, you will see all kinds of things about, the things that I talked about. So it's one of those ones that you use with respect for what it does. It's a humble little plant, the way it looks with those little pretty purple flowers, and it's unassuming, but it is very powerful. And I'd love to know what you think. Maybe you have it in your flower garden because it's just so beautiful. But thanks for tuning in, guys. That's another great tip and another great bit of information on the amazing lobelia, and we'll see you next time.